Hey guys, Jared with Trident Fly Fishing, and today we're going to be tying a game-changing fly. We're going to tie the Feather Game Changer in a very simplified but very effective version. And we're going to get started right now. Okay, so in the vise I just have the fish skull articulated fish spines, and I'm just going to start my thread, which is just a brown in 140. So cover that up, make sure you close that gap there. So I'm going to tie this in kind of a burnt orange with India hen. It's called crayfish orange. I really like this color. I also like it in just kind of a straight dark brown. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of create a tail here, and off the hackle patch I just grab some kind of wispier feathers. I'm going to tie them in on either side of the hook shank here, or the shank. Kind of adjust my length. Take that out, rotate this thing around, and do the same thing. So this is the different sections of my little hackle patch here. This is what I use for the bottom. I mean, the bottom comes, smallest, and then I come up here, and I actually just kind of bend it like this, and I pick out, two from here, and this will be my neck size. And then I go up a little bit. This will be my neck size, and then I kind of flip it over and pull like my biggest feathers. And you can see the difference here. So I pull my biggest ones out of here. Also too, you can kind of, if you look in here, get some kind of marabou-y stuff. And this is what I was using to cover my gaps. So to prepare two of these feathers, we'll just grab two. I lay them together. Get my tips here. Strip off, you can see the transition point where the stem goes from thick to thin. And then for me, the easiest way to do this is to grab hackle pliers. Make sure they're still aligned. And then hold them there and strip them back. And that's how I've been preparing them. That's my delta. I like this short. It may be easier for you to tie it in long, but that's it. So I'm going to use my hackle pliers to grab the tips of the feathers and pull them back and create a little delta, which I'm going to use as my tie-in point. So just catch that, bring it back to where your other feather ended, cover that up, and just hang your thread there. Grab both of these at the same time, and then the key here is to kind of brush the fibers back as you wrap them forwards. Grab them both. And they're short, so they're a little hard to handle. I used to use hackle pliers, but I found I would break them more often. So just use my fingers now. Okay. Oop, it slipped a little. It's okay. Just tie those off. Make sure they're really on there. Trim this out. And I'm going to grab another set of feathers and do the same thing again. So two feathers from the same area. Okay, so I have another set of feathers prepared here, and I'm just going to tie them in right in front of where my other feathers ended. Make sure they're all the way back. And I'm going to leave my thread right behind the eye here. Just grab both of those. Again, pull them down so your feathers are spread, or your fibers are spread out, and then pull them back a little bit, just like you would wrap a soft hackle. So continue up to the eye, and this should be enough to get me to the eye. You don't have to go super, super dense on these, and that's why I like wrapping with two at a time. Because this is an involved pattern, but this just speeds up my tying process just enough. So I'm just going to whip finish here. And I'm going to reinforce that point with a tiny, tiny bit of super glue. If you're heavy-handed, you may want to skip super glue and just use head cement, because if it gets into your feathers, it can just kind of ruin the pattern very quickly. Cool. So the next thing I'm going to do is grab my second shank, And how I like to lay this out is I like to use a short shank, a slightly longer shank, and then another shank of the same size, and then from there I'll go to my hook. This pattern is more of, sometimes it's a little difficult to get them in there. This pattern is more of a style than a pattern itself, so feel free to kind of change it up. You can see I kind of have my little tail there, and adjust it how you like. Like I said, this is going to be a simplified version. I'm not adding any flash or anything. I'm just only using India head. Okay, so once you get your other shank in the vise, just do the same thing. Cover up that bend there with thread, and you can see if you look closely, there's this little, sometimes this is sharp here, so just be aware of that. And that's why I like to get it covered up with thread, so I don't end up breaking my thread. So just get rid of your thread there. So just kind of these kind of fluffier fibers, a little less dense than the other ones. And you can see I kind of fluffed them out. So I like to break off the tips. So I just have this fuzz. And I'm going to use that to kind of hide the gap here. It's not imperative that you do it, it's just something that I like to do. I think it makes the fly look a little better. So we're just going to do that there. And just like we did the tail. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Just rotate that around. And tie it in flat. Get rid of that. So now moving up my system of shanks here, I'm also going to move up my India hen and grab a little higher up on the skin itself, and that's going to get me slightly larger feathers and continue my taper. So from this point on, guys, it's all going to be the same. I may pause and add notes, but we're probably going to fast forward through this, so stay tuned. All right, so we're back. I'm going to grab my articulation wire, and there's a couple different wire choices here. You can use wire bite guard, or you can use mono, but I wouldn't use mono. I'm going to use a 6-strand tieable wire, and I'm just going to stick it through the hook eye here to get started, and I'm going to get that out. I'm going to take my hook here, and this is a NS122 light stinger hook, one of my favorite hooks, and I just put a bright orange bead on there. One thing I do like with these patterns is to have weight up front. Sometimes I'll counteract the weight a little bit with some spun deer hair behind it, and it really helps push and create turbulence behind the fly. But for this one, I'm just going to add a bead. And this is kind of, this size, this color combo is a good kind of general pattern for me for fall trout. Smallmouth also love it. So just get my wire on there. Just going to do one strand at a time. That way I can take my measurement. And I want this to be long enough so it moves, but short enough so it doesn't foul. So it's about there, maybe a little shorter. I'm gonna get it on there and adjust. So let's see, tighten that up. If I can get a grip on it. Oop, right there. I'm gonna walk this back too. So I want it right about there. It's perfect. So I like to always come back. I didn't put a trailing stinger hook on here, but sometimes I do. And it's imperative if you do that to really make sure that this wire is on there, because you'll get, a fish hooked up on the back and you don't want it to pull out. Just grab crappy scissors and trim that off, cover this up, and then I'm going to hit it real quick with super glue. So for this part of the hook here, or the fly on the hook shank, you're going to want to grab from your hackle patch the biggest feathers, or the longest feather length here. So it's going to come from the very top, and it's surprising how long some of these are. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to grab 2 of them and do the same thing I've been doing, which is just grabbing them by the tips, pulling them back to create a delta, bringing my thread back again. I'm going to start right in front of that hook point. So tie that in. And I should be able to get through this shank here with just 3 series of feathers, so 6 feathers total, I think. Let's see. So if you notice too, I didn't tie anything in at the rear of the shank here as far as kind of to cover up this gap, because typically these fibers are long enough and it's fine. So tie that off, cut it out, and grab another series of feathers. I think one thing that really helped me with this pattern was not trying to pick feathers, but just going up the length of the patch itself, and then also tying 2 in at once, because I used to tie 1 in at a time and it would take twice as long, and I feel like I would break them more often too. I do still tend to break the tips off. I'm still heavy-handed with it, but if you do, you can either cut it off and tie another one in, or just continue wrapping with 1 feather at a time. And you could see this is a messy fly, so it's, you try to get all your fibers laying back where you want them, but they kind of sort themselves out on their own too. And in the water, it's still going to look great. One more dense hackle collar here, and we should be good. This is, if I was going to add, maybe some wool, or like I said, I like deer hair. This is the part where I would add it in right here, right behind the bead. It would do double duty to kind of seat my bead and to, like I said, provide the changing density of the fly so it creates turbulence. But I'm not going to on this one. I'm just going to continue and finish with hackle, which is also, all right, so the last collar. And still dense. I'm trying to get this whole thing right behind that bead. All right, that worked out perfectly. Just really crank down on my stems here. Make sure I got them good. And then trim off. Cover those stems up. Okay, good enough. Just gonna whip finish. And then I'm going to finish this whole thing off with a little bit of super glue. And I'm going to pull this thing out of the vise and show you guys. All right, let's check that out. You may have to kind of brush it out a little bit. You can grab a dubbing brush and kind of make sure everything's facing the right way and looking good. But that is it. That's a mini little feather game changer in an orange crawfish color. Like, seriously, you got to check it out. Great pattern, moves incredible in the water, and like I said, it is a game changer. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you hit subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're notified of all of our future fly tying videos, and we'll see you next time.